Here we are again. Hey, last week I was, by chance, just staring at a photograph that I hadn't seen before, and I don't remember what the reason was that I was staring at it. But then all of a sudden, I think I was looking at it because it was such a bad picture in color. It was a picture out of the White House, and all these people were wearing different clothes that did clash, so it wasn't a good painting per se. But then I started saying, well, what does this have? I started blurring my eyes. You used to do all sorts of things with your eyes when you're looking at nature. Just you learn stuff about it. It's pretty cool. And but looking at this picture, I suddenly realized that several students had started asking me about patterning and what I really mean by patterning. And I wanted, I give these offhanded comments about it in the sort of the last and the most recent iteration of my thoughts on it. But this thing gave in hand the idea that it would be useful to talk about the difference between patterning and spotting. And they're very related. They can be related. They aren't automatically related, but they're pretty close. As you can think, patterning, we talked about it before, is this idea of flat abstractions in a painting, like silhouette abstractions. And then pattern, but it implies more. Like if you're talking about wallpaper, it implies repetitions or more of it, sort of filling the field. So that filling the field, though, if it's spots of light that make these patterns, then you'd think of it as spotting. So let's just look at some pictures, and this doesn't have to be a complicated one, but it's just one that you'll have to sort for yourself. This is my how I find it useful to think. So so let's just go, and I'm going to try to remember to bring my laser with me this time again. I'll start saying here now, by the way, thank you all for your sharing and all the rest. Oh no, it's got elongated on me. I think it got elongated. Did it? No, I guess not. No, I guess not. Now, so I hope nobody will be offended by what this represents. Politics is messing up everything in our lives these days. We need to get our heads out of it and just get more elevated, right? That's the nature of the arts. It doesn't mean that, for example, our founding fathers, there wasn't an elevated quality there. We would never have had the liberties for the last 200 years that we enjoy here in America. But still, I'm talking about, this idea of fighting with each other and taking political positions. But in any case, you recognize Melania probably there on the left, Melania Trump. And I didn't purposely cut off Trump. There was a bunch of words over there. I didn't want them. So here we have now. As I was staring at this picture, and I was looking at that dress, that purple dress in the middle. And I was thinking, boy, she's trying to scream out of the rest of the field, whoever that is. I don't know if that's a congresswoman or a wife of somebody, or this is a bunch of military people. I think I saw. And I recognize certain others. There's some politicians in the room and stuff. But the two things I saw were that purple and screaming red down there. And I'm thinking to myself, would I really put those together in a picture? Maybe I'd put the tie together with the lower part of that dress in a picture. But these are the kind of silly thoughts that are randomly running through my poor fevered brain. And then I looked around and I saw the pattern on that redder dress, and I started seeing patterns, and so I looked around, and there was a pattern over here on this whiter dress to the right, and so I saw it as pattern. I just started thinking, this is one of those things you got to do with nature. Just observe, just take it in, and just wonder about it. But we have this discussion all the time about pictorial content. What is it picture worthy? In other words, would it be good in a picture, or what kind of an idea is it that you might use in a picture in any case, right? And that's what patterning is. So anyway, I started blurring my eyes down, and then I started seeing these spots of light, right? Spot. I saw those two as a set, and then I backed up. There was more, and I backed up, and I realized there's this big white here breaking out into spot, whatever other spots of light. So if you can blur down a ton, and you can reduce that to something that feels a little flattish, you have a picture of patterning. So I combine those two things. So you can see the lights are spotted around, but the fact that they feel cut out and have a cutout quality, to the extent that they do, we think of that also as patterning. Now, I'm not sure I can actually say this to you in a simplistic enough way for a complex thing, but I'm just simply saying that I don't really separate them. They can be together, spotting and patterning. So that what we think of as in this case, say this head over here, that would be a dark spot in a light background, right? So that would be, but these are light spots in a dark background. So patterns are of such that they are silhouettes, they are darks on lights, or even middle tones. This here is a pattern. But you can see the other values that are the same as that one disappear because the overall value of the background is the same roughly. And so here you can say that this piece, the middle tone here comes through, jumps over, and then, so you can see a bunch of little middle tones also participating in their own little world that isn't the highly lit world, right? It's a different world. But pattern doesn't get limited like that. Pattern is just cutouts, and you'll find it very easy to relate cutouts that are the same value to each other. And I think mostly when we say patterning, we do mean significantly that, because that's the lights, for example, in this world, that's the most outstanding thing. Anyway, keep blurring down, and I suddenly saw this has some sort of potential in terms of pictorial fun, and that is in the distribution of the spots. And again, there's that flat thing that goes on is very intriguing in a world that is in our world as it is flat. So that two-dimensional thing. You see that the spotting doesn't seem to work as well up here where you start getting fuzzy edges and all that sort of stuff. I mean, sorry, the idea of patterning doesn't make as much sense in the way my mind works on it. And so that's more in the class of what I call the spots, the dark spots. There's a spot, other dark spots. If you get big enough patterns in other places, the whole area could begin to look like a dark spot. Anyway, so you can see interesting patterns. You can see the whole thing. This is all out of the lights, all these interesting patterns, and then every once in a while, a spot also. And there it is. That's pattern. So that's just a thought for you to think about, an idea for you to think about in terms of patterning. Now, I'm showing you these because when I was with Gammel, I was working on a little, I guess it was a mural project with the idea of just doing a decorative, imaginative painting with Gammel. And at one point, I'd worked up the drawing for this. It's an Apollo figure, but it's actually an Indian. Instead of having a lyre, the Indian figure has a bow and some other thing, maybe a spear. And my version of this thing, I decided to go. I had an Apollo cast, but I was using it as a basis, just something to draw from and use for a model. And I had some figures down here that were goats. You can see a little bit better down here. They feel a little bit more like that. But I think what I'd done, I don't know if I'd traced this. It doesn't quite look like I traced these things, but I transferred it somehow. And you could see because of the influence of Gammel, I was looking for pattern. So there is a dark pattern on a light world. Now, if I'd articulated it better, these would be light patterns or middle tone patterns on a dark area, but they would all participate in the pattern world. So there could be an interchange of patterns, on one side being dark lit against light, on the other side being light lit against dark, and still patterns. And if you take them all in together, and I say that again, that if they're flat, I think of them as pattern. If they tend to be flat, and if they're just spots, I think of them as spotting. So you could say that perhaps we're thinking of this as spot of lights, or however you want to think of the darks as spot. But that's not. It's really more of a dark picture with spots of light. But that's what we mean by spotting. And then the distribution of these, the size of them and how they play throughout the picture, is the intrigue of spotting. But patterning has to do with that shape aspect of it, much more. So there you might look at the Greek vase. And I didn't show one here. I've shown it to you all before. But look at Greek vases, especially the little plate type ones, because they are simple. And you can see how intriguing the patterning gets. And I've showed you some stuff by Leighton. I'm not going to show you more of that. So from there, I look at early Dega, and early Dega, you can see a similar thing happening. In the case of the beach one here, it just looks like he decided that the beach was a field, a value field, and he just made as interesting a cutout of all the darks as he could in the most almost monotonous cutout way you possibly could make them. You virtually no edges, no value edge differences, but you can see that sense of the pattern, the way we think of pattern in that flat way. Now, the spotting wise, you have these dark spots, and you see they break out into other spots out here. And you can say that the spotting has a pattern to it and that sort of thing. You know what I mean? So, but I still think of it as useful to think of them as two separate things, the distribution of the spots. And you can again see the light spots. There's the dominant light spot, and there's another light one over here, and distribution of other light spots. And if you look at them all as of a piece, you got to get used to doing that. Look at things as sets. And you'll see whether or not if they actually feel good together. That means the painter actually got himself involved. These are imaginative, presumably all these are imaginative works. He wasn't a believer in painting from life. Even if he went to the beach, he didn't sit there and draw. He didn't do this painting from life. It doesn't even look like it could have been. And to some degree, to some degree that this one here, these are both early. That's why I'm showing it to you, relatively speaking. I shouldn't say that about this, but I'm quite sure it is. But I don't know how close it is to this one. But in this case here, you have light spots on this side, and they tend toward, if you pop your eyes, you can do that, popping your eyes and look away just a little bit, you can see they tend toward being patterny. They're cutouts. And the same thing on the other side, you can see that against a middle tone background, and this is again a middle tone to dark background, the whites will be the cutouts or will be the spots. And then to the extent they're cutouts, I think of them as pattern making. In other words, that's when you start involving shape itself in a very fine way, in a very finessed way, it would be a better way of saying it, which is what's happening over here. So he's got dark spot patterns, dark spots on a middle tone background in this portion of the picture. And you can see he's trying to be interesting with them, which is always our job. Can we be interesting? And of course, when you have spots distributing, right? You have darks over there, you also have darks over here. So this whole thing's become the set of the darks. And that, if a painter's really there in the room with you, will be a good-looking set. The darks will be a good-looking set. But that's the spotting portion of it again. And then, of course, when it gets down to the shape, then you'd expect great shape interrelationships. So now I'm showing you one last Degas. This is where he actually goes a little bit hog wild. And I want to point at the collar shapes and spots in here that all have shapiness, that all have cutoutness, right? He's very much into that. It feels very, I don't know if it's specifically Angian, but it feels very much like he's thinking, well, let's do pattern. Let's do the outline of things interesting, right? So I'm going to show you up here. You can see the light spots are down here. Then there's this whole world of light. And by the way, the pattern here, pattern, all this stuff is all interrelated with the cutout, the flatness down here, and then it comes back up here with these patternistic things. So the whole picture winds up being very flattish looking. I can't tell you, I don't think this is that bright in the center. I don't think it's quite as, the whites are quite this developed, but I can't tell you I've ever seen this picture in person. So it just doesn't look plausible based on what I do know about Dega, but anything's possible. But it was useful because it gives us clear patterning. So again, we're talking about silhouette cutouts and the way they interplay in a spot in the world of the spots when they're spotting. Otherwise, they would just be interesting in and of themselves. Just for example, if you're taking a rod, you say, "Oh, what an interesting pattern that makes," right? But when you talk about patterning, I think of it as a distribution across the whole field, which puts you right in that question about whether spotting is the same thing as. But so you can look at this thing two different ways, and you must. And one of them, and multiple different ways, by the way, because there's so many windows. The complexity of the visual world and the possibilities in the music is as many as there are musical instruments in a symphony orchestra. But you can see, if you look at it, popping your eye, standing back a bit, that the dinkiness of these little shapes, you can see the massiveness of some of these things and the bigger orientation of those things. Well, there's a sort of an orderliness to those kinds of sizes of those patterns in relation to each other. And never mind the interplay going up and like this, which also seems to happen over here, going up and like this and hooking back up again. He's interrelating things every which way to Sunday. So you have spotting, and notice enjoy the spotting as do you like the distribution? And then the next part of it is, do you like the shape making and the interplay of shape as through from one to the next to the next to the next, which is where you involve me in the question of patterning. So this is just another smaller version of exactly the same thing, right? Where he's taken basically a dark picture at the bottom, a light picture at the top, and he's broken the lights out into spot patterns down here. And rather in a way, he's done the same thing here. He's taken the darks and spotted them around here. But you can see that he's making patterns out of the silhouettes. He's actually getting you intriguing patterns. And Degas is always interesting, is always the thing to say. You can quote Gammel anytime. Degas is always interesting. Anyway, I think you can follow that a little bit. Don't confuse spots and the distribution of spots with pattern, which may be some combination of the two and not always fully interrelated. So that's probably the best I can do with that subject, I think. Oh no. I mean, it may be the best I can do, but still, let's look at Gammel before we go. And so here's Gammel, who basically is that guy telling me, and you saw in my earliest work, which I'm not showing here again, the orientation toward making a pattern. I picked that up really quickly. But you can see how this flat See the flat cutaway? This whole idea of that's pattern, the not just the flatness, but the intrigue in the cutting of it out. So it's the patterning on a Greek plate, a Greek vase, a Greek plate, that you're really seeing here. This beautiful cutaway. He's getting a little bit of the dark on middle tone, cutaway down here. And then the question is, are they fun patterns? Do they make fun patterns? But the cutout is the thing that makes it a pattern, in my view. And then there's a distribution of them that then becomes patterning. But you can see him doing this over and over. Even in the midtones here, it's all cutaways, it's all cutouts. It's not a lost and found. Well, I mean, it has elements where pieces disappear and appear, but Gammel's very much oriented around creating pattern and get silhouette interrelationships, like the body and arm over here talking to this part over here. But the cutout pattern, the pattern, just notice it. Notice how important it is to him, and that it's an element of picture making, and one not to be neglected. I see a lot of people setting up still lifes in which they don't make one silhouette in the picture. Well, you really don't have much of an opportunity. You have an opportunity to do spotting, but you don't necessarily have much of an opportunity to do pattern, which is some combination, as I said, of silhouette plus spot. So Gammel values that. Now, one of the things it does in an imaginative picture, it's going to make the picture appear flatter, just as it did with Dega. You can see these things tend to look very cut out. And Gammel actually liked that. He liked Mantegna, among other people. I think one of his favorite painters is Mantegna. Now, this has a little bit more of a sense of the round, and it has all this broken color stuff, the softening up of that, so it doesn't feel but it's as much like it's just flat screen as Gammel's does, but it's still that same basic thing that it does. It'll tend to flatten the picture, and at the point it becomes that feeling of flatness, then puts a tremendous pressure on the patterning skills that you have. Okay. There's always more to say on these things if I can't remember it. These are, as I said, these are off the cuff, and they're usually just reactions to the visual world. So I hope you're going to enjoy that, especially you guys who are in my composition class. I'm sending it off to you, aiming it at you to some degree, more than others. In any case, all of you enjoy it if you can, and I want to say thanks again for all your wonderful contributions, donations, for sharing, subscribing, liking, commenting. Been a fair number of good comments. Because my producer is going to be gone for a week or more, I'm having to do a couple in a row, which you're seeing this is the second one done the same day. And so the comments that come in for me certainly save me having to sort of sort something out for you. But these two have been in my mind. I'm going to do one on Velasquez. I'm not sure I'm going to get to it before my producer leaves town. But somebody did ask about, I haven't forgotten you. You asked about Velasquez and his relationship to the Boston School. How is he different? How is he like? And then you talked about the drawings. We'll get to that. I'm putting that one together sort of now. All right. So again, have a great painting week, and I'll see you in the next one.